I grew up in the mountains in Bavaria. My mother fled with my older brother and me from bombardments of Munich, and we got stuck there, and there was nothing. I mean, we had no running water and lived in a tiny, tiny place, and had only an outside sort of toilet, which was snowed under snow drifts in winter, and all summer long I never had shoes until I was 11, only for winter, yes, and for late in the fall or early in spring I was always barefoot. And we had to invent our own games, we had to invent our own tools. I was always into inventing things, and I had no idea that cinema existed until I was 11. I had not seen cinema, and I didn't know it even existed. I can only say that there was a fairly short period of time, maybe 2 weeks, maybe maximum 3 weeks, where everything somehow revealed itself for me. It was like a moment of, I say it with a necessary caution, and you should touch this term only with a pair of pliers. It was some sort of an illumination. And that was where I knew I had to travel on foot. I knew the world would reveal itself to me by traveling on foot. And shortly after that I set out, and I wanted to go into Albania, which was terra incognita at the time. And I walked along the border, and I knew I had some sort of I say it again with caution, a high duty to be a poet, but poet of cinema. I'm never circling around my own navel. So I'm a storyteller, and I'm inventive, and people sometimes think, yeah, he must be like his characters in the movies. No, I'm not. People think I'm this obsessive Teutonic man who is going wild. No, I'm not. My wife even maintains firmly that I'm a fluffy husband. In the whole film industry, when you look at Hollywood, I mean, it's completely crazed, and I see myself as the only one, literally the only one who is clinically sane. In a way, I can say I haven't had a career, because career means planning and what do I do after that step or so. It's always, I keep saying, it's like burglars in your kitchen in the middle of the night. You wake up at 3 in the morning, something stirs, and there are 5 burglars. And the one who comes with the most vehemence at you, with an axe in his hand, or a knife, or a gun. So you have to deal with that one first. And that's how my film projects are coming at me. I've done documentaries, but I have done other things that's overlooked quite often. I've written books, and I have a suspicion that my prose may outlive my films. I don't know what exactly it is. The only consolation I have, and the only sort of anchor that I have, that I focus and right in the middle of turmoil, I write. There's no one nowadays who writes prose like me. Language. It was always the last resort, and I think my writing is more intense and has more substance in my films. Nobody reads anymore. You do not, and I preach to those who attend the Rogue Film School, read, 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 read. never be a filmmaker if you do not read, or you will never be a philosopher, you will never understand, get a hold on the world, a grasp on it, if you do not read. And I have a dictum: those who are too much on the internet or too much on television, they lose the world. And those who read gain it. You win the world if you read. The absence of culture of reading and reading books is something which is an overwhelming worldwide phenomenon and very, very, very dangerous. And of course, text messaging is only one of the bastard children of that absence of reading. And in a way, it's how you read the world, how you understand the world, how you open concepts or perspectives about the world. And a second major thing which sounds like a paradox, but I think it is not, with the explosive evolution of technical tools of communication, and that is text messaging, cell phones, television, radio, you just name it, internet, blogs, whatever is out there. It has had a very almost explosive spreading out and propulsion of these things. And in reverse proportions, I believe our solitudes are increasing. And you see it with the text messages. Yes, there is contact, but it's contact without significance. There's no depth about it anymore. We are not isolated, but in a philosophical sense, I think deeply alienated and in deep solitudes. And I do believe that these instruments of communication, in its enormous spreading power, reduce us to solitudes. One of the lumbermen who cleared a swath of jungle over the mountain where we had to pull the ship, we had 35 of them, and very tough men. And they were working with these chainsaws that make a terrible noise, and you have these fumes of gas oil and snakes. You wouldn't see a snake for miles. And they all work barefoot, and I would work barefoot as well, because you sink into the mud or into a swamp, and when you pull your leg out, your shoe is gone and you never find it anymore. So I would be barefoot like them, but one of them one day was bitten twice in his foot, and there's one snake, Chuchupe, bushmaster, I think, and they are some of the most poisonous you have on this planet. And it's known you have a survival of maybe 120 seconds, and then there's cardiac arrest and pulmonary arrest. And we all knew it, but we had some serum, some antidote, but the camp was 20 minutes away. So he had, in his shock, he had dropped the chainsaw and it stopped. And he calmly looked at the situation, sees the snake going away and sees it's a chuchupi, and just picks up the chainsaw, starts it like an outboard engine and sawed his foot off. So I wasn't there, but I saw him 20 minutes later, and he was just ashen. He was grey. All his body was grey, but he survived. But he was intelligent enough to immediately saw off his foot. When you do a film, you have to be very, very careful that these things are not happening. But things happen when you build a bridge, for example. Yes, you have accidents, but none of them was directly related to the shooting of the film. There were extreme precautions. For example, some of the hawsers snapped. And when that happens, there's some sort of a whiplash effect that can decapitate one or several persons. So whenever we moved the ship, there was far and wide nobody around. I was around, but no one else. You see, I never force anyone. That's a myth that I'm pushing people to the brink of what they can do or to their physical existence even. Yes, when you are shooting in rapids, we saw the ship going through the rapids. There was nobody on board. It looked spectacular, and then it didn't look that dangerous. So we said, let's be on board the ship with cameras. So who are the ones who, on their free will, come with me? There were 7. And Thomas Mauch, one of the cinematographers, upon one of the impacts, he had this camera on his shoulder and flew through the air and smashed down on the deck with the camera in his hand, which was something like 20 kilos, and it split his hand apart. Yes, this happens, and that was part of our of a bigger deal. Yes, we do risk certain things that we do not impose on anyone else. We had to fulfill a duty which was way beyond us. Yes, I love nature. I love wild nature, but most of the time against my better judgment. It's not the Walt Disney world view of wild nature, and it's not romantic. That's quite obvious. Is there such a thing like derangement or insanity among animals? Why is it that human beings ride on horses and chase the bad guy? And why is it that such an advanced creature like a chimp does not ride a goat into the sunset? I sometimes say as a metaphor, those are films made on foot, and much of what I have in images within me comes from traveling on foot. And you know, you're all alone and you are exposed in the world. Has a strange attitude. The world somehow reveals itself to those who travel on foot. It's very hard to communicate it because nobody travels on foot nowadays. But I have done it, and I'm not like a movie now, a young lady who walks a Pacific Trail. I'm not. I travel basically without luggage. Whether I ever won an Oscar or not doesn't make a film better or worse. It just doesn't. And it has to come as a natural concomitant. You see, you don't spend sleepless nights over this. And I enjoy seeing that colleagues of mine who are really good get the Academy Award. Wonderful. I don't need it because, you see, I've made enough films. I don't need it really badly. I've made 70 films now. Thanks God, Germany is embedded. I've always been fascinated by the country and fascinated by the somehow incomprehensible barbarism. I still have not fully understood it, and I'm trying to come to grips. Seeing it from outside, from the west coast of the United States, when the European Union was awarded the Peace Nobel Prize, I remember the German press was grumbling, and all they all want a photo op, and they all, it's self-celebratory, and and the euro is in chaos, and Greece is giving everybody a difficult time, on and on and on. It was just grumbling and mumbling and discontent. And you know what I thought? You idiots, you blaring idiots. The European Union is the largest, the biggest practiced peace project that this history of this world has ever seen, period. I walked from Munich to Paris when Lotte Eisner, who was about 80 at that time, suffered from a massive stroke. A friend called me, come quickly, Lotte is dying. She was very important for me because she was, in a way, a mentor for the new German cinema, and for me much more than just for this kind of movement. I didn't know what to do at the moment, and I looked quickly into flight schedules, and then I decided, no, I have to come on foot because I would not allow her to die. It was some sort of a pilgrimage, some sort of a protest, 1 million steps. She would not die because she was not allowed to die. She would not. And of course she was important for me and for all of us because being Jewish and really a target of the Nazis, because she had written against the emerging Nazis and in Der Stürmer, in the most important of their newspapers. It was written a few weeks before Hitler took power. Heads will roll and her head will be among the first. So the very day Hitler took power, she fled to France, was in hiding for years, survived barely, was working at the newly founded Cinémathèque in Paris with Henri Langlois, and she gave us legitimacy. She had the authority to declare legitimate German culture again, and that was the importance. I might just add that about 8 or 9 years later, when she was close to 90, nobody knew exactly her age because she cheated. She wrote me a letter, I should come, so I went to her place, and we would settle things always very casually. And she said to me, listen, she said, I'm very old now and I cannot see anymore, and I cannot see films, I cannot read books, I can barely walk. And she said a very beautiful, almost biblical word in German. It is lebenssatt, like a biblical prophet or one of the biblical figures at age 880 is saturated of life, finally dies. And she said, but there is still this spell upon me that I must not die. And I said to her casually, Lotte, if that's a problem, it's being lifted by now. And 2 weeks later she died, and I said to her, no, it's right, it's okay now. It feels totally all right. And she died very, very few days later. So, of course, I have made a lot of steps during my life working in cinema, and I've never stood still. I'm not the one who would do Aguirre 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when you look at Bad Lieutenant or My Son, What Have You Done, and try to compare it to earlier films like, I don't know, Kaspar Hauser, yes, you see, it's the same person who made it, but of course I haven't stood still. I take Livy, the Second Punic War, with me, which has my two great heroes in it. Hannibal, who moved across the Alps with elephants and a whole army of a motley army, and his counterpart, until today derided in history, is Fabius Maximus, who was voted by Roman citizen to be the consul and leader in war against Hannibal after the two most catastrophic defeats that Rome ever suffered. And he was the one who would always retreat, never face him in battle, because he knew that would be the end of Rome. Until today, he has his nickname or his additional name, Fabius Maximus Cunctator, which means the hesitant, the coward, hesitant one. And he was derided by Roman historiography, and until today nobody knows Fabius Maximus. Everybody knows Hannibal, but he defeated Hannibal by attrition and by perseverance and by following a vision relentlessly, no matter what people thought of him. And this is why I love him so much. Nicolas Cage and I were in a very closely knit conspiracy, and we held together, and both of us said to each other, we are not going to sign, I'm not going to sign if he was not on board, and he wouldn't sign if I wasn't on board. So that was a hard nut to crack for the producers. At the same time, they sensed, yes, I was saving money, and I said to them, I immediately waived my right to have a trailer. I waived my right to have a personal assistant. I waived my right to have a chauffeur. And I waived my right to have a director's chair. I find them such an abomination anyway. You see these collapsible chairs and your name's on it. It's all this kind of status ritual to sit in a chair like this. I've never had one, and I said to the production, this is going to save you $65. '20th Century Fox wanted to do a couple of films with me. It only ended up by them not producing but distributing Nosferatu. And they asked me, and who is going to finance the screenplay? And I said, I need $2. No, $1.50. I need 150 sheets of white, of blank paper, stationery, and I write it in a week. So what do you mean by financing a screenplay? And they were very puzzled and thought there was something not right with me. But I think there was definitely something not right with them. Determination means to go rogue, which means the borderline of where illegal or criminal activity starts has to be somewhat blurred, and you have to be determined to do your film, but you must not be caught. I believe in stupidity. Politics, in its essence, is the definition of the enemy, of the opponent. And thanks God, we have a couple of good targets. You see, the problem with festivals is a very fundamental one. We have 3,000, maybe 4,000 festivals per year worldwide, but we have only 3 or 4 real good films. So that's a fundamental problem, and sometimes it's not even 3. So I find it very funny. It's a hilarious incident. The beauty of space programs is, of course, much of our fantasies go into that. Much of what we are dreaming about, another world, possibly a better world out there, or travel in space, is a wonderful thing for making movies. And at the same time, of course, I'm completely convinced we'll never, no matter what advances in technology are being made in the next 100,000 years, we will never leave our solar system. That's our limit. Because reaching the next planet only 4.5 years away, light years away, would take with the fastest speed that you can reach for a human being by accelerating him or her without killing the person. It would take you 120,000 years to reach that place. So how do you do that? We just won't do it. But even though we know that there's a sobering aspect to our most elaborate fantasies, still it is beautiful to imagine us out in different galaxies. I think that the time is over where we should believe that facts constitute truth. It is a massive mistake. And cinema verite has always postulated that. And it is a very, very silly concept and not really deep plowing enough for anyone to take it really seriously. Cinema verite ultimately is the answer of the 60s in movies, but of course you hear people talking in an auditorium. Is this one 400 or 500 filmmakers in Amsterdam? I saw that. And they are speaking about how documentaries should be made, and we should be only like a fly on the wall and not interfere. And I just couldn't take it anymore, and I grabbed the mic and I said, no, we are directors, we are creators, we should be the hornets that sting. We go out there, and then there was a roar of disgust against me, and I shouted back, Happy New Year's, losers. I do not believe that I create complete artifacts that are out there and nobody will ever understand it. When you have a ship going over a mountain, it is an image that I'm sure belongs to all of us. It's like a dormant collective image that I can articulate. And you recognize it as if it were a secret brother that you had somewhere, and I introduce you to your own brother. And you recognize it. And it's not a foreign image. We immediately understand it. I love cinema, and I love everything about cinema, including acting, including producing, including directing or editing, creating music for it. So I have a multifaceted love for cinema, but I also have a great love for literature. I have a great love for being athletic. Of course, I'm too old to be a world champion in ski flying today, but it has been my dream. And I dream of being in the perfect soccer game where all the best that ever were are playing in one team, and I'm among them. So that's a very vivid dream, and it shows how much I love that kind of sport. And of course I love my children, and I love my wife. So it's not, and sometimes, sure, in a way I'm in love with the world. And this is a very significant moment in Encounters at the End of the World. There's a caterpillar driver in McMurdo Station. He's a Bulgarian, and he holds a degree in philosophy and another degree in comparative literature. And he speaks about his childhood and how his grandmother read the Iliad and the Odyssey to him before he could even read or write, and about the Argonauts and their voyages. And he says, and now he said something which hit me like a bolt of lightning. He says, that was when I fell in love with the world. And I just held my breath and I thought, this is the description of me. I fell in love with the world. Cinema has a strange, mysterious quality sometimes, like poetry, that it can illuminate us, that it can give us a deeper insight. And I've termed the word, or coined the word, ecstatic truth, the ecstasy of truth, almost like in late medieval mystics in religion would have an experience where you step beyond, where you step almost outside yourself, and you have a deep illumination. And that is what poetry sometimes, in best of cases, can give us, and cinema sometimes, in best of cases, can give us. And that's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for wild storytelling and for the fantasies, and where you work yourself into a story, and in such a frenzy of storytelling that a winged cow that flies over the barn is absolutely not miraculous anymore. See, that's what cinema is all about, in my opinion, and that's what I try to do. And I'm gonna hang on in.